start on the recording. I am back. Alright. Hold on. I'm just thinking ahead. Okay. So yes, now we are on chapter 7. Chapter 7, and there's no parts. No parts in this one, so it's just chapter 7. So chapter 7. The Mesa was like a ship becalmed in a strait of lion-colored dust. The channel wound between precipitous banks and slanting from one wall to the other across the valley. Ran a streak of green, the river and its fields. On the prow of that stone ship, in the center of the strait, and seemingly a part of it, a shaped and geometrical outcrop of the naked rock, stood the pueblo of Malpais. I don't know how it really wants me to. Wait, I'm pretty sure this is a real place, so. Hold on. I don't want to just say Malpais if it's supposed to be pronounced Malpais. Yeah, I think it's supposed to be called Malpais. Or no. Yeah. Yeah, Malpais. Which in Spanish is wrong country. That's what it translates to. So it's because país is like a country, so wrong country or bad country. But it says here, the Malpais is like a landform. Speaking regions for a rough and barren landscape that consists of relict and largely eroded lava fields. Yeah, so that's why they call it that. So it's basically like sort of a wasteland in a way. But yeah, it's supposed to be pronounced Malpais. Yeah, on the prow of that stone ship, in the center of the strait, and seemingly a part of it, a shaped and geometrical outcrop of the naked rock, stood the pueblo of Malpais, block above block, each story smaller than the one below. The tall houses rose like stepped and amputated pyramids into the blue sky. As their feet lay a straggle of low buildings, a crisscross of walls, and on three sides of the precipices fell sheer into the plain. A few columns of smoke mounted perpendicularly into the windless air and were lost. Queer, said Lenina. Very queer. It was her ordinary word of condemnation. I don't like it, and I don't like that man. She pointed to the Indian guide who had been appointed to take them up to the pueblo. Her feeling was evidently reciprocated. The very back of the man, the very back of the man, as he walked along before them, was hostile, sullenly contemptuous. Besides, she lowered her voice, he smells. Bernard did not attempt to deny it. They walked on. Suddenly it was as though the whole air had come alive and were pulsing with the indefatigable movement of blood. Up there, in Malpais, the drums were being beaten. Their feet fell in with the rhythm of that mysterious heart. They quickened their pace. Their path led them to the foot of the precipice. The sides of the great mesa ship towered over them, 300 feet to the gunwale. I wish we could have brought the plane, said Lenina, looking up resentfully at the bank impending rock face. I hate walking, and you feel so small when you're on the ground at the bottom of a hill. They walked along for some way in the shadow of the mesa, uh, not surrounded. They walked along for some way in the shadow of the mesa, rounded a projection, and there, on a water-worn ravine, was the way up the companion ladder. They climbed. It was a very steep path that zigzagged from side to side of the gully. Sometimes the pulsing of the drums was all but inaudible. At others they seemed to be beating just round the corner. When they were halfway up, an eagle flew past so close to them that the wind of his wings blew chill on their faces. In the crevice of the rock lay a pile of bones. It was all oppressively queer, and the Indians smelt stronger and stronger. They emerged at last from the ravine into the full sunlight. The top of the mesa was a flat deck of stone. I like the charring tea tower, was Lenina's comment, but she was not allowed to enjoy her discovery of this reassuring resemblance for long. A padding of soft feet made them turn around. Naked from throat to navel, their dark brown bodies painted with white lines, like asphalt tennis courts. Lenina was later to explain. Their faces inhuman with daubings of scarlet, black, and ochre. Ochre? Or ochre? Ochre. Okay, cool, thank you. Their faces inhumane with daubings of scarlet, black, and ochre. Oh shit, I should have got a water. Yeah, but I'll finish this paragraph and then I'll go get some water. Their faces inhumane with daubings of scarlet, black, and ochre. 2 Indians came running along the path. Their black hair was braided with fox fur and red flannel. Cloaks of turkey feathers fluttered from their shoulders. Huge feather diadems exploded gaudily around their heads. With every step they took came the clanking clatter of their silver bracelets, their heavy necklaces of bone and turquoise beads. They came on without a word, running quietly in their deerskin moccasins. One of them was holding a feather brush. The other carried in hand what looked at the distance like 3 or 4 pieces of thick rope. One of the ropes writhed uneasily, and suddenly Linnea saw that they were snakes. Oh shit, Oh, yeah, that was it. Okay. I will be back. I need to just get some water. good in my room? Okay, I am back. Excuse me. Okay, yeah. One of the ropes writhed uneasily, and suddenly Lenina saw that they were snakes. The men came nearer and nearer. Their dark eyes looked at her, but without giving any sign of recognition, any smallest sign that they had seen her or were aware of her existence. The writhing snake hung limp again with the rest. The men passed. I don't like it, said Lenina. I don't like it. She liked even less what awaited her at the entrance to the pueblo, where their guide had left them while he went inside for instructions. Hold on. Yeah, and she liked even less what awaited her at the entrance to the pueblo, where her guide had left them while he went inside for instructions. The dirt, to start with, the piles of rubbish, the dust, the dogs, the flies. Her face wrinkled up into a grimace of disgust. She held her handkerchief to her nose. But how can they live like this? She broke out into a voice of indignant incredulity. It wasn't possible. Incredulity. Bernard shrugged his shoulders philosophically. Anyhow, he said, they've been doing it for at least five. They've been doing it for the last 5 or 6 thousand years, so I suppose they must be used to it by now. But cleanliness is next to fordliness, she insisted. Yes, and civilization is sterilization, Bernard went on, concluding on a tone of irony, the second hypnopedic lesson in elementary hygiene. But Ford is definitely not a religion. Yeah, exactly. We don't have religion anymore, but we say we have a Ford. We we celebrate Ford. You know, doesn't make sense, but you know. Yeah, exactly. That's all. We just think he's neat. Bernard went on, concluding on a tone of irony, the second hypnopedic lesson in elementary hygiene. But these people have never heard of our Ford, and they aren't civilized. So there's no point in. Oh! She gripped his arm. Look! An almost naked Indian was very slowly climbing down the ladder of the first floor terrace of a neighboring house. Rung after rung, with the tremulous caution of extreme old age, his face was profoundly wrinkled and black, with like a mask of obsidian. The toothless mouth had fallen in. At the corners of the lips and on each side of the chin, a few long bristles gleamed almost white against the dark skin. The long braided hair hung down the gray wisps around his face. His body was bent and emaciated to the bone, almost fleshy, almost fleshless. Very slowly he came down, pausing at each rung before he ventured another step. What's the matter with him? Whispered Lenina. Her eyes were wide with horror and amazement. He's old, that's all, Bernard answered as carelessly as he could. He too was startled. but he made an effort to seem unmoved. Old? She repeated. But the director's old. Lots of people are old. They're not like that. That's because we don't allow them to be like that. We preserve them from diseases. We keep them we keep their internal secretions artificially balanced at a youthful equilibrium. We don't permit their magnesium calcium ratio to fall below what it was at 30. We give them transfusion of young blood. We keep their metabolism permanently stimulated. So, of course, they don't look like that. Partly, he added, because most of them die young before they reach this old creature's age. Youth almost unimpaired till 60, and then crack. The end. But Lenina was not listening. She was watching the old man. Slowly, he came down. His feet touched the ground. He turned. In their deep sunken orbits, his eyes were still extraordinarily bright. They looked at her for a long moment, expressionlessly, without surprise, as though she had not been there at all. Then slowly, with bent back, the old man hobbled past them and was gone. But it's terrible, Lenina whispered. It's awful. We ought to have not come here. She felt in her pocket for her soma, only to discover that, by some unprecedented oversight, she had left the bottle down at the rest house. Bernard's pockets were also empty. Lenina was left to face the horrors of Malpais unaided. They came crowding in on her thick and fast. The spectacle of two young women giving breast to their babies made her blush and turn away her face. She had never seen anything so indecent in her life, and what made it worse was that, instead of tactfully ignoring it, Bernard proceeded to make open comments on this revolting, viviparous scene. Ashamed now that the effects of the soma had worn off on the weakness he had displayed that morning in the hotel, he went out of his way to show himself strong and unorthodox. What a wonderfully intimate relationship, he said, deliberately outrageous. And what an intensity feeling it must be generate. And what an intensity the feeling it must generate. I often think one may have missed something in not having had a mother. And perhaps you've missed something in not being a mother, Lenina. Imagine yourself sitting there with a little baby of your own. Bernard, how can you? The passage of an old woman with ophthalmia, ophthalmia and a disease on the skin distracted her from her indignation. Let's go away, she begged. I don't like it. But at this moment, her guide came back, and beckoning them to follow, led the way down the narrow street between the houses. They rounded a corner. A dead dog was lying in a rubbish heap. A girl with a goiter? I'm pretty sure that's right. Goiter. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a goiter. This book is like, take a word and if it has like a sound, they just switch the E and the R, where the R comes first and then the E. So I'm just like, it always kind of, takes me out of whack. Um, yeah, a woman with a goiter was looking for lice in the hair of a small girl. Their guide halted at the foot of a ladder, raised his hand perpendicularly, then darted it horizontally forward. They did what he mutely commanded, climbed the ladder and walked through the doorway, which it gave access along into a long narrow room, rather dark and smelling of smoke and cooked grease and long unwashed clothes. At the further end of the room was another doorway, through which came a shaft of sunlight and the noise very loud and close to the drums. They stepped across the threshold and found themselves on a wide terrace. Below them, shut in by the tall houses, was the village square, crowded with Indians, bright blankets and feathers in black hair and the glint of turquoise and the dark skins shining with heat. Lenina put her handkerchief to her nose again. In the open space at the center of the square were two particular were in the open space at the center of the square were two circular platforms of masonry and trampled trampled clay trampled clay the roofs trampled clay. The roofs, it was evident of underground chambers. For in the center of each platform was an open hatchway that with a ladder emerging from the lower darkness. A sound of subterranean flute playing came up, and was almost lost in the steady, remorseless. Uh, the sound of subterranean. Yeah, a sound of subterranean flute playing came up, and was almost lost in the steady, remorseless persistence of the drums. Lenina liked the drums. She shut her eyes, she abandoned herself to their soft, repeated thunder, allowed it to invade her consciousness more and more completely, till at last there was nothing left in the world but that one deep pulse of sound. It reminded her reassuringly of the synthetic noises made at the solidarity services and Ford's Day celebrations. Orgy porgy, she whispered to herself. These drums beat out just the same rhythms. There was a sudden startling burst of singing, hundreds of male voices crying out fiercely in harsh metallic unison. A few long notes in silence, the thunderous silence of the drums, then shrill and neighing treble, a woman's answer. Then again the drums, and once more the men's deep, savage affirmation of their manhood. Queer, yes. The place was queer. So was the music. So were the clothes, and the goiters, and the skin diseases, and the old people. But the performance itself, there seemed to be nothing specially queer about that. It reminds me of a lower caste community sing, she told Bernard. But a little later, it was reminding her of a good deal less of that innocuous function. For suddenly, there had swarmed up from those round chambers underground a ghastly troop of monsters, hideously painted out of all semblance of humanity. They had tramped out a strange limping dance round the square, round and round again, singing as they went, round and round, each time a little faster, and the drums had changed and quickened their rhythm, so that it became like a pulsing fever in the ears, and the crowd had begun to sing with the dancers, louder and louder, and first one woman had shrieked, and then the other, and then another, and another. as though they were being killed. And then suddenly, the leader of the dancers broke out of line, ran to a big wooden chest which was standing at one end of the square, raised the lid, and pulled out a pair of black snakes. A great yell went up from the crowd, and all the other dancers ran toward him with outstretched hands. He tossed the snakes to the first corner, then dipped back into the chest for more. More and more black snakes, and brown and mottled. He flung them out. And then the dance began again on a different rhythm. Round and round they went with their snakes, snakily, with a soft undulating movement at the knees and hips, round and round. These people are cool as fuck. Hell yeah. Fucking, they're witnessing some real shit, not their fake, fake synthetic music, whatever. Yeah, round and round they went with their snakes, snakily, with the soft undulating movement at the knees and hips, round and round. Then the leader gave a signal, and one after another, all the snakes were flung down in the middle of the square. An old man came up from underground and sprinkled them with cornmeal, and from the other hatchway came a woman and sprinkled them with water from a black jar. Then the old man lifted his hand, and startlingly, terrifyingly, there was absolute silence. The drums stopped beating. Life seemed to have come to an end. The old man pointed towards the two hatchways that gave entrance to the lower world, and slowly, raised by invisible hands from below, were emerged from the one a painted image of an eagle, from the other that of a man, naked and nailed to a cross. They hung there, seemingly self-sustained, as though watching. Hold on, I need to read that again. Yeah, they hung there, seemingly self-sustained, as though watching. The old man clapped his hands, naked but for a white cotton breechcloth. A boy of about 18 stepped up to the crowd and stood before him, his hands crossed over his chest, his head bowed. The old man made the sign to cross. The old man made the sign of the cross over him and turned away. So slowly, the boy began to walk around. Slowly, the boy began to walk around the writhing heap of snakes. He had completed the first circuit and was halfway through the second. From among the dancers, a tall man wearing the mask of a coyote and holding in his hand a whip of plaited leather advanced toward him. The boy moved on as though unaware of the other's existence. The coyote man raised his whip. There was a long moment of expectancy, then a swift movement, the whistle of the lash and its loud, flat-sounding impact on the flesh. The boy's body quivered, but he made no sound. He walked on at the same slow, steady pace. The coyote struck again, and at every blow, at first a gasp, then a deep groan went up from the crowd. The boy walked. Twice, thrice, 4 times round he went. The blood was streaming. 5 times round, 6 times round. Suddenly, Lenina covered her face with her hands and began to sob. "Oh, stop them," she implored. But the whip fell and fell inexorably, 7 times round. Then all at once the boy staggered, and still without a sound, pitched forward onto his face. Bending over him, the old man touched his back with a long white feather, held it up for a moment, crimson for the people to see, then shook it thrice over the snakes. A few drops fell, and suddenly the drums broke out again into a panic of hurrying notes. There was a great shout. The dancers rushed forward, picked up the snakes, and ran out of the square. Men, women, children, all the crowd ran after them. A minute later, the square was empty. Only the boy remained, prone to where he had fallen, quite still. 3 old women came out from one of the houses, and with some difficulty lifted him and carried him in. The eagle and the man on the cross kept guard for a little while over the empty pueblo. Then, as though they had seen enough, slowly slank down through their hatchways, out of sight, into the netherworld. Lenina was still sobbing. Too awful, she kept repeating, and all Bernard's consolations were in vain. Too awful, that blood, she shuddered. Oh, I wish I had my Soma. There was the sound of feet in the inner room. Lenina did not move, but sat with her face in her hands and seeing apart. Only Bernard turned round. The dress of a young man who now stepped out into the terrace was Indian, but his plaited hair was straw-colored. His eyes a pale blue, and his skin a white skin bronzed. Hello, good morrow, said the stranger in faultless but peculiar English. You're civilized, aren't you? You come from the other place, outside the reservation. Who on earth? Bernard began in astonishment. The young man sighed and shook his head. A most unhappy gentleman, and pointing to the bloodstains in the center of the square. Do you see that damned spot? He asked in a voice that trembled with emotion. A gram is better than a dam, said Lenina mechanically from behind her hands. I wish I had my Soma. I ought to have been there, the young man went on. Why wouldn't they let me be the sacrifice? I'd have gone round 10 times, 12, 15. Palotawea only got as far as 7. They could have had twice as much blood from me. The multitudinous seas in Carnadine. He flung out his arms in a lavish gesture, then despairingly let them fall again. But they wouldn't let me. They disliked me for my complexion. It's always been like that. Always. Tears stood in the young man's eyes. He was ashamed and turned away. Astonishment made Lenina forget the deprivation of Soma. She uncovered her face and for the first time looked at the stranger. Do you mean to say that you wanted to be hit with that whip? Still averted from her, the young man made a sign of affirmation. For the sake of the pueblo, to make the rain come and the corn grow, and to please Pukong and Jesus, and then to show that I can bear pain without crying out, yes. And his voice suddenly took on a new resonance. He turned with a proud squaring of the shoulders, a proud, defiant lifting of the chin. To show that I am a man. Oh, he gave a gasp and was silent, gaping. He had seen, for the first time in his life, the face of a girl whose cheeks were not the color of chocolate or dogskin, whose hair was auburn and permanently waved, and whose expression, amazing novelty, was one of benevolent interest. Lenina was smiling at him. Such a nice-looking boy, she was thinking, and a really beautiful body. The blood rushed up to the young man's face. He dropped his eyes, raised them again for a moment, only to find her still smiling at him, and was so much overcome that he had to turn away and pretend to be looking very hard at something other on the other side of the square. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, what was that? Yeah, the blood rushed up to the young man's face. He dropped his eyes, raised them again for a moment, only to find her still smiling at him, and was so much overcome that he had to turn away and pretend to be looking very hard at something other on the other side of the square. Bernard's questions made a diversion. Who? How? When? From where? Keeping his eyes fixed on Bernard's face, for so passionately he did long to see Lenina smiling that he simply dared not look at her. The young man trying to explain himself. Linda and he. Linda was his mother. The word made Lenina look uncomfortable. The young man tried to explain himself. Linda was his mother. The word made Lenina look uncomfortable. Were strangers in the reservation. Linda had come from the other place long ago, before he was born, with a man who was his father. Bernard pricked up his ears. She had gone walking alone in those mountains over there to the north, had fallen down a steep place and hurt her head. Go on, said Bernard excitedly. Some hunters from Malpais had found her and brought her to the pueblo. As for the man who was his father, Linda had never seen him again. His name was Tomakin. Yes, Thomas was the DHC. Yes, Thomas was the DHC's first name. He must have flown away, back to the other place, without her. A bad and unkind, unnatural man. And so I was born in Malpais, he concluded. In Malpais. And he shook his head. The squalor of that little house on the outskirts of the pueblo. The face of dust and rubbish separated it from the village. Two famine-stricken dogs were nosing obscenely in the garbage at its door. Inside, when they entered, the twilight stank and was loud with flies. Linda! The young man called. From the inner room, a rather hoarse female voice said, Coming! They waited. Hold on. I also need to charge my thing. It's almost out of battery. They waited. In bowls on the floor were the remains of a meal, perhaps of several meals. The door opened. A very stout blonde squaw stepped across the threshold and stood looking at the strangers, staring incredulously, her mouth open. Lenina noticed with some disgust that the two front teeth were missing, and the color of the ones that remained. She shuddered. It was worse than the old man, so fat, and all the lines on her face, the flabbiness, the wrinkles, and the sagging cheeks with those purplish blotches, and the red veins on her nose, the bloodshot eyes, and that neck, and the blanket she wore over her head, ragged and filthy, and under the brown sack-shaped tunic, those enormous breasts, the bulge of the stomach, the hips. Oh, much worse than the old man, much worse. And suddenly the creature burst out in a torrent of speech, rushed at her with outstretched arms, and Ford, it was too revolting. In another moment she'd been sick. In another moment she'd be sick. Pressed her against the bulge and bosom and began to kiss her. Ford! to kiss slobberingly, and smelt too horrible. Obviously, never had a bath, and simply reeked of that beastly stuff that was put into Delta and Epsilon bottles. No, it wasn't true about Bernard. Positively stank of alcohol. She broke away as quickly as she could. A blubbered and distorted face confronted her. The creature was crying. "Oh, my dear, my dear!" The torrent of words flowed sobbingly. "If you knew how glad, after all these years, a civilized face, yes, and civilized clothes, because I thought I should never see a piece of real acetate silk again." She fingered the sleeve of Lenina's shirt. The nails were black. "And those adorable viscose velveteen shorts. Do you know, dear, I've still got my old clothes, the ones I came in and put away in a box. I'll show them to you afterwards. Though of course the acetate has gone into holes. Though of course the acetate has all gone into holes. But such a lovely white bandolier. Though I must say your green Morocco is even lovelier. Not that it did me much good, that bandolier." Her tears began to flow again. "I suppose John told you what I had to suffer. Not a gram of soma to be had. Only a drink of mezcal every now and then, when Pope used to bring it. Pope is a boy I used to know, but it makes you feel bad afterwards. The mezcal does. And you're sick with the peyote. Peyote? I'm gonna search that word up. Peyote. 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 I think it's peyote, but I want to make sure. No, not peyote. No. Peyote. Yeah, peyote. Okay, there you go. But it makes you feel so bad afterwards. The mezcal does. And when you're sick with the peyote, besides, it was always made that awful feel. Besides, it always made that awful feeling of being ashamed much worse the next day. And I was so ashamed. Just think of it. Me, a beta, having a baby. Put yourself in my place." The mere suggestion made Lenina shudder. "Though it wasn't my fault, I swear, because I don't know how it had happened. I still don't know how it happened. Seeing as I did all the Malthusian drill, by numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, always, I swear it. But all the same, it happened, and of course, there wasn't anything like an abortion center here." "Is it still down in Chelsea, by the way?" she asked. Lenina nodded. "And still floodlighted on Tuesdays and Fridays?" Lenina nodded again. "That lovely pink glass tower." Poor Linda lifted her face, and with closed eyes, ecstatically contemplated the bright remembered image. "In the river at night," she remembered. Great tears oozed out from behind her tight shut eyelids. and back and flying back in the evening from Stoke Pogues, and then a hot bath and vacuum massage. But there, she drew a deep breath, shook her head, opened her eyes again, sniffed once or twice, then blew her nose on her fingers and wiped them on the skirt of her tunic. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said in response to Lenina's involuntary grimace of disgust. "I oughtn't to have done that. I'm sorry." "But what are you to do when there aren't any handkerchiefs?" I remember how it used to upset me, all that dirt and nothing being aseptic. I had an awful cut on my head I had an awful cut on my head when they first brought me here. You can't imagine what they used to put on it. Filth. Just filth. Civilization is sterilization, I used to say to them. And streptococcus to Banbury tea, to see a fine bathroom in WC, as though they were children. But of course they didn't understand. How should they? And in the end, I suppose I got used to it. And anyhow, how can you keep things clean when there isn't hot water laid on? And look at these clothes. This beastly wool isn't like acetate. It lasts and lasts, and you're supposed to mend it if it gets torn. But I'm a beta. I worked in the fertilizer room. Nobody ever taught me to do anything like that. It wasn't my business. Besides, it never used to be right to mend clothes. Throw them away when they've got holes in them and buy new. The more stitches, the less riches. Isn't that right? Mending's antisocial. But it's all different here. It's like living with lunatics. Everything they do is mad. She looked round, saw John and Bernard had left them and were... She looked around, saw John and Bernard had left them and were walking up and down the dust of garbage outside the house. But none of the less confidentially lowering her voice and leading, while Lenina stiffened and shrank, so close that the brown reek of embryo poison stirred the hair on her cheek. "For instance," she hoarsely whispered, "take the way they have one another here. Mad, I tell you, absolute mad. Everybody belongs to everybody else, don't they? Don't they?" She insisted, tugging at Lenina's sleeve. Lenina nodded her averted head, let out a breath she had been holding, and managed to draw another one, relatively untainted. Well, here," the other went on, "nobody's supposed to belong to more than one person. And if you have people in the ordinary way, the others think you're wicked and antisocial. They hate and despise you. Once a lot of women came and made a scene because their men came to see me. Well, why not? And then they rushed at me. No, it was too awful. I can't tell you about it." Linda covered her face with her hands and shuddered. "They're so hateful, the women here. Mad and cruel. And of course they don't know anything about Malthusian drill, or bottles, or decanting, or anything of that sort. So they're having children all the time, like dogs. It's too revolting. And to think that Ford. And yet John was a great comfort to me. I don't know what I should have done without him. Even though he did get so upset whenever a man, quite a tiny boy even once, but that was when he was bigger. He tried to kill poor Wai Wai Hus Wai Hasiwa Wai Hasiwa. Or was it Pope? Just because I used to have them sometimes. But I could because I couldn't because I never could make him understand that that was what civilized people ought to do. Being mad's infectious, I believe. Anyhow, John seems to have caught it from the Indians, because of course he was with a lot of them, even though they always were so beastly to him and wouldn't let him do all the things other boys did, which was a good thing in a way because it made it easier for me to condition him a little. Though you've no idea how difficult it is. There's much more. There's so much one doesn't know. It wasn't my business to know. I mean, when a child asks you how a helicopter works, or who made the world, well, what are you to answer if you're a beta and have always worked in the fertilizing room? What are you to answer? And that is the end of chapter 7. I think we should continue with chapter 8, because now it just got interesting, and I feel like you want to know more. People are, yeah, they're fucking losing their minds out here. And if you were paying attention too, which I thought I'd get a reaction as soon as I read the part, but she's the person that got left on the island, and she had a baby. And now she's just like, oh my god, civilized people. Wait, were you not paying attention? That was the whole point of this chapter. Ah. Oh, are you doing your homework? You already. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, you're finishing up your thing. So yeah, I get you. You're finishing your homework. Hell yeah. Yes, I do that. I do that. But now I can hear whenever you're gonna. I can hear the notifications again. It'll give me the boop boop. But yeah, no, go ahead. Do and finish your paper. Yeah, I thought it was weird that you weren't reacting the way you normally do. I don't know why, but I automatically thought that you had already finished your paper. But yeah, finish your paper and I will finish this chapter. This chapter 8. This one is exciting, I think. Well, the end sounds like it's exciting. Okay, so chapter 8. Chapter 8. Outside in the dust and among the garbage, there were 4 dogs. Now, Bernard and John were walking slowly up and down. So hard for me to realize, Bernard was saying, to reconstruct as though we were living on different planets, in different centuries, a mother and all this dirt and gods and old age and disease. He shook his head. It's almost inconceivable. I shall never understand unless you explain. Explain what? This! He indicated the pueblo. That! And it was the little house outside the village. Everything, all your life. But what is there to say? From the beginning, as far back as you can remember. As far back as I can remember. John frowned. There was a long silence. It was very hot. They had eaten a lot of tortillas and sweet corn. Linda said, "Come and lie down, baby." They lay down together in a big bed. Sing. And Linda sang. Sang streptococci to Banbury tea. And bye bye baby dancing, soon you'll need decanter. Her voice got fainter and fainter. There was a loud noise, and he woke with a start. A man was saying something to Linda, and Linda was laughing. She had pulled the blanket up to her chin, but the man pulled it down again. His hair was like 2 black ropes, and around his arm was a lovely silver bracelet with blue stones on it. He liked the bracelet, but all the same he was frightened. He hid his face from Linda's body. He hid his face against Linda's body. Linda put her hand on him, and he felt safer. Hold on. Oh shit. Also, what the baby? No, the baby is John. If that's what you're referring to. So the director and Linda was the person that he went to the reservation with. Then she got lost. And then by some miracle or whatever you want to call it, she got pregnant. Is that what you're referring to? The baby? I don't think Linda has any more kids. I think it's just John. What do you mean? Like, are you saying you missed out on a lot of the chapter, or what? You're not being dumb. You're just being inattentive. Oh, you confused. Oh, okay. Yeah, so, do you have some questions? Maybe I can clarify without spoilers? Or you think you're good? Cool. Yeah, so 20 years ago, not in the present in this book, but like about 20 years ago or so, the director and Linda went on a vacation to the reservation. But Linda, she got lost. And then the director's just like, okay, well, I'm going back to civilization. And he left her there. And then she became pregnant. And she had John. Yeah, and her son is John. And now Bernard and Lenina are visiting the reservation. And now Bernard is making the connections. Yeah, she was talking about that. Yeah, I don't know who you confused who with, but it's okay. It's one of the problems of listening to people read. I know I have that problem. Oh, I see. Yeah, no, she's probably too old to be having uh, kids. But yes, on with the story. There was a loud noise, and he woke with a start. A man was saying something to Linda, and Linda was laughing. She had pulled the blanket up to her chin, but the man pulled it down again. His hair was like two black ropes, and his round arm was a lovely silver. And his round arm was was a lovely silver bracelet with two stones in it. He liked the bracelet, but all the same, he was frightened. He hid his face against Linda's body. Linda put her hand on him, and he felt safer. In those words he did not understand, so she said to the man, "Not with John here," said the man. The man looked at him, then again at Linda, and said a few words in a soft voice. Linda said, "No," but the man bent over the bed. Towards him, and his face was huge, terrible. The black ropes of his hair touched the blanket. "No," Linda said again, and he felt her hand squeezing him more tightly. "No, no!" But the man took hold of one of his arms, and it hurt. He screamed. The man put up his other hand and lifted him up. Linda was still holding him, still saying no. No. The man said something short and angry, and suddenly her hands were gone. Wait. Linda was still holding him, still saying no. The man said something short and angry, and suddenly her hands were gone. Linda! Linda! He kicked and wriggled. But the man carried him. He kicked and wriggled. But the man carried him across the door, opened it, and put him down on the floor in the middle of the other room, and went away, shutting the door behind him. He got up. He ran to the door, standing on tiptoe. He could just reach the big wooden latch. He lifted it and pushed, but the door wouldn't open. Linda, he shouted. She didn't answer. He remembered a huge room, rather dark, and there were big wooden things with strings fastened to them, and lots of women standing around them, making blankets. Linda said. Linda told him to sit in the corner with the other children while she went and helped the children. And Linda told him to sit in the corner with the other children while she went and helped the women. He played with the little boys for a long time. Suddenly, people started talking very loud, and there were the women pushing Linda away, and Linda was crying. She went to the door, and he ran after her. He asked her why they were angry. Because I broke something, she said, but then she got angry too. How should I know how to do their beastly weaving? She said. Beastly savages. He asked her what savages were. When they got back to their house, Pope was waiting at the door, and he came in with them. He was a big gourd full of stuff that looked like water. He had a big gourd full of stuff that looked like water. Only it wasn't water, but something with a bad smell that burnt your mouth and made you cough. Linda drank some, and Pope drank some. And then Linda laughed a lot and talked very loud. And then she and Pope went into another room. Then Pope went away. He went into the room. When Pope went away, he went into the room. Linda was in bed, and so fast asleep that he couldn't wake her. Yeah, she got crunk dizzy. Yeah. Yeah, when Pope went away, he went into the room. Linda was in bed and so fast asleep that he couldn't wake her. Pope used to come often. He said the stuff in the gourd was called mescal, but Linda said it ought to be called soma because it made you feel ill. But Linda said it ought to be called soma, only it made you feel ill afterwards. He hated Pope. He hated them all the men who came to see Linda. One afternoon, he had been playing with the other children. It was cold, he remembered, and there was snow on the mountains. He came back to the house and heard angry voices in the bedroom. They were women's voices, and they were words he didn't understand, but he knew that they were dreadful words. Then suddenly, crash! Something was upset. He heard people moving about quickly, and there was another crash and another noise like hitting a mule, only not so bony. And then Linda screamed, "Oh, don't," she said. He ran in there. There were 3 women in dark blankets. There were 3 women in dark blankets. Linda was on the bed. One of the women was holding her wrists. Another was lying across her legs so that she couldn't kick. The third was hitting her with a whip. Once, twice, 3 times, and each time Linda screamed, Crying, he tugged at the fringe of the woman's blanket. Please, please! With her free hand, she held him away. The whip came down again and again. Linda screamed. He had caught hold of the woman's enormous brown hand between his own and bit it with all his might. She cried out, wrenched her hand free, and gave him such a push that he fell down. While he was lying on the ground, she hit him three times with the whip. It hurt more than anything he had ever felt, like fire. The whip whistled again, fell. The whip whistled again, fell. But this time it was Linda who screamed. But why did that hurt? But why did they want to hurt you, Linda? He asked that night. He was crying because the red marks of the whip on his back still hurt so terribly. But he was also crying because people were so beastly and unfair, and because he was only a little boy and couldn't do anything against them. Linda was crying too. She was grown up, but she wasn't big enough to fight against three of them. It wasn't fair for her either. Why did they want to hurt you, Linda? I don't know. How should I know? It was difficult to hear what she said, because she was lying on her stomach and her face was on the pillow. They say those men are their men, she went on. And she did not seem to be talking to him. She seemed to be talking to someone inside herself. A long talk which she didn't understand. And in the end, she started crying even louder. Crying even louder. Oh, don't cry, Linda. Don't cry. He pressed himself against her. He put his arm around her neck. Linda cried out, Oh, be careful, my shoulder, oh! And she pushed him away, hard. His head banged against the wall. Little idiot, she shouted. And then, suddenly, she began to slap him. Slap, slap. Linda, he cried out. Oh, Mother, don't. I'm not your mother. I won't be your mother. But Linda, ow! She slapped him on the cheek. Turned into a savage, she shouted, having young ones like an animal. If it hadn't been for you, I might have gone into the inspector. I might have got away. But not with a baby. That would be too shameful. He saw that she was going to hit him again and lifted his arm to guard his face. Oh, don't, Linda, please don't. Little beast. She pulled down his arm. His face was uncovered. Don't, Linda. He shut his eyes, expecting the blow. But she didn't hit him. After a little time, he opened his eyes again and saw that she was looking at him. He tried to smile at her. Suddenly, she put her arms around him and kissed him again and again. Sometimes, for several days, Linda didn't get up at all. She lay in bed and was sad. Or else she drank the stuff that Pope brought and laughed a great deal and went to sleep. Sometimes she was sick. Often she forgot to wash him and there was nothing to eat except cold tortillas. He remembered the first time she found those little animals in his hair, how she screamed and screamed. The happiest times were when she told him about the other place. And you can really go flying whenever you like? Whenever you like. And she would tell him about the lovely music that came out of the box, and all the nice games you could play, and the delicious things to eat and drink, and the night that came when you pressed a little thing on the wall, and the picture that you could hear and feel and smell, as well as see, in another box for making nice smells, and the pink and green and blue and silver houses as high as mountains, and everybody happy, and no one ever sad or angry or belonging, and everyone belonging to everyone else. And the boxes where you could see and hear what was happening on the other side of the world. and babies in lovely clean bottles. Everything so clean, no nasty smells, no dirt at all, and people never lonely, but living together and being so jolly and happy, like the summer dances here in Malpais, but much happier, and the happiness being there every day, every day. He listened by the hour, and sometimes when he went and the other children were tired with too much playing, one of the old men of the pueblo would talk to them in those other words of the great transformer of the world, and of the long fight between right hand and left hand, between wet and dry, of Awana Awana Awalilona, of Awalaneo, trying to say this right, Awana Wilona, of Awana, who made a great fog by thinking in the night, and then made the whole world out of the fog, of Mother Earth and Sky Father, of Ahayuta and Marsalama, the twins of war and chance, of Jesus and Pukon, of Mary and Esanatlehi, Esanatlehi, the woman who makes herself young again, of the black stone of Laguna, and the great eagle, and Our Lady of Acoma. Strange stories, all the more wonderful to him for being told in the other words, and not so fully understood. Lying in bed, he would think of heaven and London, and Our Lady Acoma, and the rows and rows of babies in clean bottles, and Jesus flying up, and Linda flying up, and the great director of world hatcheries, and Awana Wilona. Lots of men came to see Linda. The boys began to point fingers at him, and the strange other words. They said that Linda was bad. They called her names he did not understand, but he knew they were bad names. One day, they sang a song about her, again and again. He threw stones at them. They threw back. A sharp stone cut his cheek. The blood couldn't stop. He was covered with blood. Linda taught him to read. With a piece of charcoal, she drew pictures on the wall. An animal sitting down, a baby inside a bottle. Then she wrote letters. The cat is on the mat. The tot is on the pot. He learned quickly and easily. When he knew how to read all the words she wrote on the wall, Linda opened her big wooden box and pulled out from under those funny little red trousers she never wore a thin little book. He had often seen it before. "When you're bigger," she had said, "you can read it." Well, now he was big enough. He was proud. "I'm afraid you won't find it very exciting," he said, "but it's the only thing I have." She sighed. "If only you could see the lovely reading machines we used to have in London." He began reading. The chemical and bacteriological conditioning of the embryo. Practical instructions for beta embryo store workers. It took him a quarter of an hour to read the title alone. He threw the book on the floor. "Beastly, beastly book," he said, and began to cry. The boys still sang their horrible songs about Linda. Sometimes, too, they laughed at him for being so ragged. When he tore his clothes, Linda did not know how to mend them. In the other place, she told him, People threw away clothes with holes in them and got new ones. Rags, rags, the boys used to shout at him. But I can read, he said to himself, and they can't. They don't even know what reading is. It was fairly easy if he thought hard enough about the reading to pretend that he didn't mind when they made fun of him. He asked Linda to give him the book again. The more the boys pointed and sang, the harder he read. Soon he read all words quite well, even the longest. But what do they mean? He asked Linda, but even when she could answer, it didn't seem to make it very clear. And generally, she couldn't answer at all. What are chemicals? He would ask. Oh, stuff like magnesium salts and alcohol for keeping the deltas and epsilon small and backward, and calcium carbonate for bones and all that sort of thing. But how do you make chemicals, Linda? Where did they come from? Well, I don't know. You get them out of bottles. And when the bottles are empty, you send them up to the chemical store for more. It's the chemical store people who make them, I suppose, or else they send to the factory for them. I don't know. I never did any chemistry. My job was always with the embryos. But it was the same with everything he asked about. Linda never seemed to know. The old men of the pueblo had much more definite answers. The seed of men and all creatures, the seed of the sun and the seed of the earth and the seed of the sky. Awanawalona made them all out of the fog of increase. Now the world has 4 wombs, and he laid the seeds in the lowest of the 4 wombs. And gradually the seeds began to grow. One day, John calculated later that it must have been soon after his 12th birthday. He came home and found a book that he'd never seen before, lying on the floor in the bedroom. It was a thick book and looked very old. The binding had been eaten by mice. Some of the pages were loose and crumpled. He picked it up, looked at the title. The book was called The Complete Works of William Shakespeare. Linda was lying on the bed, sipping that horrible stinking mezcal out of a cup. Pope brought it, she said. Her voice was thick and hoarse, like somebody else's voice. It was lying in one of the chests of the Antelope Kiva. It's supposed to have been there for hundreds of years. I expect it's true because I looked at it, and it seemed to be full of nonsense, uncivilized. Still, it'll be good enough for you to practice your reading on. She took a last sip, set the cup down on the floor beside the bed, turned over on her side, hiccuped once or twice, and went to sleep. He opened the book at random. Hold on, let me adjust myself real quick. He opened the book at random. Nay, but to live, in the rank sweat of an unseamed bed, stewed in corruption, honeying and making love, over the nasty sty. The strange words rolled through his mind, stumbled like drums at the summer dances. The strange words rolled through his mind, rumbled like the drums at the summer dances. If the drums could have spoken, like the men singing the corn song, beautiful, 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 so that you cried, like old Mitsima sang magic over his feathers, and his carved sticks, and his bits of bone and his bits of bone and stone. Kithala Silu Yeah. Ki- Kiethla, 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 Silu, Silique, 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 Kai, Silu, Silu, Silu. But better than Mitsimu, but better than Mitsima's magic. But better than Mitsima's magic because it meant more. Because it talked to him, talked wonderfully and only half understandably. A terrible, beautiful magic about Linda. About Linda lying there snoring, with an empty cup on the floor beside the bed. About Linda and Pope. Po- Linda and Pope. He hated Pope more and more. A man can smile and be a villain. Remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. What do the words exactly mean? He only he only half knew. But their magic was strong and went on rumbling in his head, and somehow it was as though he had never really hated Pope before. Never really hated him because he had never been able to say how much he hated him. But now he had these words like drums and singing the magic, and singing in magic. These words and the strange story of which they were taken. He couldn't make head or tail of it, but it was wonderful. Wonderful all the same. They gave him a reason for hating Pope, and they made his hatred more real. They made they even made Pope himself more real. Hold on just 1 second. Yeah, they even made Pope himself more real. One day, when he came in from playing, the door of the inner room was open, and he saw them lying together on the bed, asleep. White Linda, and Pope almost black beside her, with one arm under her shoulders, and the other dark hand on her breast, and on the plaits of his long hair lying across, and one of the plaits of his long hair lying across her throat, like a black snake trying to strangle her. Pope's gourd, Pope's gourd, and a cup were standing on the floor near the bed. Linda was snoring. His heart seemed to have disappeared and left a hole. He was empty. Empty and cold and rather sick and giddy. He leaned against the wall to steady himself. Remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, like drums, like the men singing from the corn, like magic. The words repeated and repeated themselves in his head. From being cold, he was suddenly hot. His cheeks burnt with the rush of blood. The room swam, and from being cold, he was suddenly hot. His cheeks burnt with the rush of blood. The room swam and darkened before his eyes. He ground his teeth. I'll kill him, I'll kill him, I'll kill him, he kept saying. And suddenly, there were more words. When he is drunk asleep, or in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, the magic was on his side. The magic explained and gave orders. He stepped back in the outer room. When he is drunk asleep, the knife for the meat was lying on the floor near the fireplace. He picked it up and tiptoed to the door again. When he is drank asleep, he ran across the room and stabbed. Oh, the blood! Stabbed again as Pope heaved out of his sleep, lifted his hand to stab once more, but found his wrist caught, held, and twisted. He couldn't move. He was trapped, and there were Pope's small black eyes, very close, staring into his own. He looked away. There were 2 cuts on Pope's left shoulder. "Oh, look at the blood!" Glinda was crying. "Look at the blood!" She had never been able to bear the sight of blood. Pope lifted his... Oh, shit. Why am I not hearing... She taught him fucking bigotry. How did she teach him bigotry? From reading Shakespeare or what? Or was it earlier in the thing? Yeah, for some reason now I'm not fucking hearing your thing. Oh, I see. Earlier, okay. I was like, where did you... I was like trying to... Yeah, I can't hear your fucking notifications. Fucking weird. Okay. She had never been able to spare the sight of blood. Poppy lifted his other hand to strike him, he thought. He stiffened to receive the blow, but the hand only took him under the chin and turned his face, so that he looked again into Poppy's eyes. For a long time, for hours and hours, and suddenly, he couldn't help it. He began to cry. Pope burst out laughing. "Go," he said, and in the other Indian words, "Go, my brave Ahayuta. Ahayuta." He ran out into the corner of the room to hide his tears. "You are 15, said old Mitsuma in the Indian words. Now I may teach you to work the clay." Squatting by the river, they worked together. "First of all," said Mitsuma, said Mitsuma, taking a lump of the wadded clay between his hands, "we make a little moon." The old man squeezed the lump into a disc, then bent the edges. The moon became a shallow cup. Slowly and unskillfully, he imitated the old man's delicate gestures. A moon, a cup, and now a snake. Mitsuma rolled out another piece of clay onto a long, flexible cylinder, hooped it into a circle, and pressed on to the rim of the cup. Then another snake, and another, round and round by round, Mitsuma built up the sides of the pot. It was narrow. It bulged. It narrowed again towards the neck. Mitsuma squeezed and patted, stroked and scraped, and there at last it stood, in the shape of a familiar water pot of malpais, but creamy white instead of black, and still soft to the touch. The crooked parody of Mitsuma's. His own stood beside it. Looking at the 2 pots, he had to laugh. "But the next one will be better," he said, and began to moisten another piece of clay. To fashion, to give form, to feel his fingers gaining in skill and power, this gave him an extraordinary pleasure. "A, B, C, vitamin D," he sang to himself as he worked. the fats in the liver, the cods in the sea. And Mitsima also sang a song about killing a bear. They worked all day, and all day he was filled with an intense, absorbing happiness. Next winter, said old Mitsima, I will teach you to make the bow. He stood for a long time outside the house, and at last the ceremonies within were finished. The door opened, and they came out. The door opened, they came out. Kothlu came first, his right hand outstretched and tightly. Kothlu came first, his right hand outstretched and tightly closed, as though over some precious jewel. Her clenched hand similarly outstretched. Kayakime followed. They walked in silence, and in silence behind them came the brothers and sisters and cousins and all the troop of old people. They walked out of the pueblo across the mesa. At the edge of the cliff they halted, facing the early morning sun. Kothlu opened his hand. A pinch of cornmeal lay white on the palm. He breathed on it, murmured a few words, then threw it, a handful of white dust, towards the sun. Kayakime did the same. Then Kayakime's father stood forward, and holding up a feathered prayer stick, made a long prayer, then threw the stick after the cornmeal. It is finished, said old Mitsima in a loud voice. They are married. Well, said Linda as they turned away, all I can say is it does seem a lot of fuss to make about so little. In civilized countries, when a boy wants to have a girl, he just... But where are you going, John? He paid no attention to her calling, but ran on, ran away, anywhere to be by himself. It is finished. In old Mitsima's words repeated themselves in his mind. Finished, finished. In silence and from a long way off, but violently and desperately, hopelessly, he had loved Kiyakime, and now it was finished. He was 16. At the full moon in the Antelope Kiva, secrets would be told, secrets would be done and born. They would go down, boys into the Kiva, and come out men, and come out again men. The boys were all afraid and at the same time impatient, and at last it was the day. And at last it was the day. The sun went down, the moon rose. He went with the others. Men were standing, dark, at the entrance of the kiva. The ladder went down into the red-lighted depths. Already the leading boys had begun to climb down. Suddenly, one of the men stepped forward, caught him by the arm, and pulled him out of the ranks. He broke free and dodged back into his place among the others. This time the man struck him, pulled his hair. "Not for you, white hair. Not for the son of the she-dog," said one of the other men. The boys laughed. "Go!" And as he still hovered on the fringes of the group, "Go!" the man shouted. One of them bent down, took a stone, threw it. "Go, go, go!" There was a shower of stones. Bleeding, he ran away into the darkness. From the red-lit kiva came a noise of singing. The last of the boys had climbed down the ladder. He was all alone. All alone, outside the pueblo, On the bare plain of the mesa, the rock was like the rock was like bleached bones in the moonlight. Down in the valley, the coyotes were howling at the moon. The bruises hurt him. The cuts were still bleeding, but it was not for pain that he sobbed, but it was because he was all alone. Right? He just wants to be part of the pack, and no, people are just like, no, we don't want you here because you're an outsider. And your mom's a whore. Basically, that's what they're doing. Yeah, exactly. Alright. What was I? Yeah, the bruises hurt him. The cuts were still bleeding. But it was not for pain that he sobbed. It was because he was all alone. Because he had been driven out, alone, into the skeleton world of rocks and moonlight. At the edge of the precipice, he sat down. The moon was behind him. He looked down on the black shadow of the mesa, into the shadow of death. He had only to take one step, one little jump. He held out his right hand on the moonlight. From the cut on his wrist, the blood was still oozing. Every few seconds, a drop fell. Every few seconds, a drop fell, dark, almost colorless in the dead light. Drop, drop, drop. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. He had discovered death. He had discovered time and death and God. Alone, always alone, the young man says. The young man was saying. The words awoke a plaintive echo in Bernard's mind. Alone, alone. So am I, he said in a gush of confidingness. Terribly alone. Are you? John looked surprised. I thought that in the other place, Linda always said that nobody was ever alone there. Bernard blushed. Bernard blushed uncomfortably. You see, he said, mumbling and with averted eyes. I'm rather different from most people, I suppose, if one happens to be decanted different. Yes, that's just it, the young man nodded. If one's different, one's bound to be lonely. They're beastly to one. Do you know? They shut me out of absolutely everything. When the other boys were sent out to spend the night on the mountains, you know, when you have that dream which your sacred animal is, they wouldn't let me go with the others. They wouldn't tell me any of the secrets. I did it by myself, though, he added. Didn't eat anything for 5 days, and then went out one night alone in those mountains there. He pointed. Patronizingly, Bernard smiled. And did you dream of anything? He asked. The other nodded. But I mustn't tell you what, he said. He was silent for a little. Then, in a low voice, once, he went on, I did something that none of the others did. I stood against the rock in the middle of the day, in summer, with my arms out, like Jesus on the cross. What on earth for? I wanted to know what it was like being crucified, hanging there in the sun. But why? Why? Well, he hesitated. Because I felt I ought to. If Jesus could stand it, and then if one has if one has done something wrong. Besides, I was unhappy. It was another reason. That was another reason. It seems a funny way of curing your unhappiness, said Bernard. But on second thoughts, he decided that there was, after all, some sense in it. Better than taking soma. I fainted after a time, said the young man. Fell down on my face. Do you see the mark where I cut myself? He lifted the thick yellow hair from his forehead. The scar showed, pale and puckered, on his right temple. Bernard looked and then quickly, with a little shudder, averted his eyes. His conditioning had made him not so much pitiful as profoundly squeamish. The mere suggestion of illness or wounds was to him not only horrifying, but even repulsive and rather disgusting, like dirt or deformity or old age. Hastily, he changed the subject. I wonder if you'd like to come back to London with us, he asked, making the first move in a campaign whose strategy he asked, making the first move he asked, yeah. I wonder if you'd like to come back to London with us, he asked, making the first move in a campaign whose strategy he had been secretly elaborating ever since, in the little house, he had realized who the father of this young savage must be. Would you like that? Of course, if I can get permission, that is. Linda, too? Linda, too? Well, he hesitated doubtfully. That revolting creature. No, it was impossible. Unless... It suddenly recurred to Bernard that her very revoltingness might prove an enormous asset. But of course, he cried, making up for his first hesitations with an excess of noisy cordiality. The young man drew a deep breath. To think it should be coming true. What I've dreamt all of my life. Do you remember what Miranda says? Who's Miranda? But the young man had evidently not heard the question. I wonder, he was saying, and his eyes shone. His face was brightly flushed. How many godly creatures are there here? How beautiful mankind is. The flush suddenly deepened. He was thinking of Lenina, of an angel in bottle-green viscose, lustrous with youth and skin food, plump, benevolently smiling. Yeah, the flush suddenly deepened. He was thinking of Lenina, of an angel in bottle-green viscose, lustrous with youth and skin food, plump, benevolently smiling. His voice faltered. Oh, brave new world, he began, then suddenly interrupted himself. The blood had left his cheeks. He was as pale as paper. Are you married to her? He asked. Am I what? Married, forever. They say forever in the Indian words. It can't be broken. Ford, no. Hell yeah, he said the name of the book. Ford, no. Bernard couldn't help laughing. John also laughed, but for another reason. Laughed for pure joy. Oh, brave new world, he repeated. Oh, brave new world that has such people in it. Let's start at once. You have a most peculiar way of talking sometimes, said Bernard, staring at the young man in perplexed astonishment. And anyhow, hadn't you better wait till you actually see the new world? And that is the end of chapter 8. But yes, now you know where the book comes from. That's the name of the book, Brave New World. Now the rest of this book is going to be on John's journey and like just his reaction to the new world. Yeah, pretty interesting. Like as soon as because I read ahead to like the last page of the of the of the thing of the chapter, and then I read that part. I'm like, ooh, baby! Now they're gonna mention the name of the book, which I'm pretty sure you were wondering why the book is named that way, and now you know. Brave New World. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, you guys. I will see you later. Thank you.